Well, thank you very much for joining us at Intermission. We just heard the terrific performance of the John Williams piece with Malice Toward None, played so beautifully by our guest Christopher Martin, so it's just fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be here and to play with you finally and to play with this great band. So it's a great pleasure.
Well, we've talked about this for a while, being able to make this happen, and so I'm really glad that all the stars aligned. We'll talk more about Aaron Kernis's remarkable piece, A Voice and Messenger, a little bit later. But first, for our audience, I want to talk about you a little bit and just your background, because for many people it's a well-known story, but for some people not so much. We know Chris Martin as the principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, right. But obviously there's a lot of stuff that happened to get you to that point.
So. Yeah, without a doubt. I come from a musical family. I come from a family of teachers also. My dad's a band director. My uncle's a band director. I have aunts who are all teachers as well, choral teacher, science teacher. My mom started as a choral teacher. So I grew up in the band world, really. My dad, my earliest memories are of hanging out with my parents at marching band practice,
Freddie Martin.
Freddie Martin.
Who I was honored to meet for the first time just only a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago in Chicago at Midwest, although having heard of him all my life. Just about.
Not the lounge singer, the
right.
band director, yeah.
Well, there's another Chris Martin, too, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, the real one. So I grew up in band, and I grew up in sort of in the drum and bugle corps world as well during the summers, and I sort of always knew as a kid that I would play brass because I'd always had a love for that sound, and I started on the horn. Dad's a horn player, and I started on horn, played horn for 2 weeks, and just really wasn't for me. And I thought for me, trumpet was always felt like my voice, and so I switched pretty quickly to trumpet, and was fortunate in that I had parents who understood and were supportive of my not only practice but my desire to get better and desire to find the best teachers and to go to very expensive conservatory and take out a bunch of loans and do all that stuff that because growing up in Georgia I had band is huge there,
right,
but there aren't a lot of kids who were wanting to go and play in an orchestra, and I had loved playing in the band, and I had loved that world, and still do to this day. But when I heard, I remember hearing a concert of Mahler with the Atlanta Symphony when I was about 15, and that's what shifted my focus into the orchestral world. Just the possibility to play this music and to play these great trumpet parts. And so I was, really very fortunate to have parents who would take me to such an experience, and it's really the case for so many of my colleagues and so many I know of your great students that having a family who's supportive and caring about what you do is really everything.
It is, and my hat is always, every once in a while, we encounter somebody who doesn't have that situation. In a way, they're doing it in spite of over their parents'
which
objections.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. And it's always remarkable, and they have a great desire to, they're just determined to do this. But it is easier when you have great support.
It is definitely easier, and I went to school far away. I went to Eastman in Rochester, New York, and a very cold place and a great weather for practicing, that's what I always said. And had wonderful teachers there, Charlie Geyer and Barbara Butler, who have since moved to Northwestern and then now are at Rice University.
Yes, they had the good sense now to move to Texas, as everyone eventually does.
So. Yeah, everybody goes to Texas, right? Everybody with a brain ends up in Texas, that's what I've heard. So I had a great time there, and after I finished school, I didn't really have any options, to be honest. I got my bachelor's from Eastman. I auditioned for one school for my master's that will remain nameless, and they didn't let me in. So I had really no options when I graduated, and I was just practicing and working. I played a summer festival and then was trying to just figure out what to do. And I spent a very brief time, a couple of weeks at the New World Symphony. And then right after that, I was doing a little audition tour for myself, and I ended up in the Philly Orchestra. And I was in the Philly Orchestra for 3 years, playing associate principal. And then one of my former teachers, another of my former teachers, Jim Thompson,
sure,
left his principal chair in the Atlanta Symphony to go to Eastman. and teach. And so I auditioned and took his place there, and I was in Atlanta for 5 years, playing first trumpet. And it was a great time to be in Atlanta. Very exciting time. New conductor and just a new kind of resurgence in the art scene in Atlanta, and especially in the symphony life there. And and I grew a lot as a person, and I grew a lot as a trumpet player. And it really helped me prepare me for Chicago. And I auditioned for Chicago a few times over the years, and it was really a case of perseverance over.
Sure.
Over anything else. And I'd always had one of my other early memories of childhood is listening to CSO records with my dad, listening to Herseth play, and hearing a sound that I'd never heard in my entire life. That a trumpet could do this. My God. So I'd always wanted to do that. I'd always wanted to play that way and play that music with those people if I could. And so over about 5 years, I took audition 3 times for the job, and then the last time I was fortunate enough to get it. And it's kind of an overwhelming, experience to not only to suddenly have such a position, but then to something that I'd thought about for so long and tried for so long. It was kind of surreal.
Right.
But it's been a wonderful blessing, and it's been it's a real privilege and an honor to do it. And the nice thing about it, besides playing with great colleagues there, is I get the opportunity to do things like this, to play a piece like this that's exciting and challenging and difficult, and to play with you and to play with this band. So.
Well, that's you came to Chicago. That's now what, 11 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, almost 11.
As we're recording this, so it's there's so much that goes into anyone's career. But we had the opportunity to talk last night that during your educational training, you were telling me that really the bulk of your playing was done in the Eastman Wind Ensemble at the time you were in Eastman, at least in terms of ensemble work that you. Because of rotation systems and all of that.
And just because of sheer numbers,
Right.
Most of the symphony orchestra concerts at Eastman had at most 3 trumpets, and the wind orchestra and the wind ensemble have obviously much more. And so everybody, not just me, but everybody in school spends the bulk of their time playing in wind ensemble, wind orchestra, and the benefit to that is. In a way, it's the same. It's in a way, it's you're learning how to play in an ensemble. You're learning to listen around you, listen to your section, then listen to the brass section, then listen to how that fits into the context of the whole ensemble. So that's no different from playing in an orchestra. The difference is that you're playing a lot more notes and a lot more often, and sometimes far more challenging music than you would be playing in the orchestra most of the time. So in a way, it's like a concentrated version of what you're doing in the orchestra, because you have the same listening skills, you're developing the same sort of sense of awareness while you're also playing a lot more notes.
Right.
So.
Exactly. I know that's the way it's, and very often my colleagues that I work with in other situations will remind me why they enjoy playing in the band or the wind ensemble, even when they're playing in orchestras other times, is just they just get to play more.
Absolutely.
So the
same reason that many of my colleagues, we enjoy playing chamber music. We play, we play CSO brass concerts every year. There's a brass quintet that plays a lot, and chamber music is always, in any form, is really interesting to me. And compared to a 110-piece symphony, wind ensemble is a chamber ensemble.
Sure, right.
And to be able to play, difficult music one on a part, or just a few two apart, is even I'm 40 now, and I've been doing this for a long time, for decades now at this point, almost 2 decades professionally. Even for me, I still find my ears and my mind open every time I play in quintet, every time I play in brass ensemble, every time I play in a more kind of small and intensive situation.
There's this beautiful recording which you were kind enough to pass on to me that you guys made that has just come out on Naxos level of the Gabrielli music plus the John Williams music for brass, which is, that was obviously made with your colleagues from across the country, but being able to come together, it's a really wonderful production. I think. It is.
it's a great group to be in for many reasons. It's amazing players, and everybody's got chops, and everybody's on fire when they play in that group. And the arrangements are
fantastic
great.
arrangements by Tim Higgins.
Tim did such a beautiful job, really beautiful job. But the great thing about it is it's really a labor of love.
Sure.
Everybody there wants to be there.
Right.
You know, nobody playing in that group is, nobody's there for the money.
Right.
No, it's definitely not that kind of thing. Everybody's there for the love of it and for the not only for the music and for the concert experience, but just to be on stage and playing together.
Sure.
And it's a unique situation. So.
But we should turn our attention to what's going to happen after intermission. There's an overture of Aaron Curtis's, but then the big piece on the program for you is his really remarkable trumpet piece, A Voice, a Messenger, originally composed for Philip Smith and New York Philharmonic Wind Section and the Big Ten Band Directors Association that had a role in commissioning that. It's been rarely performed. I think by my calculations it's had 3 performances now.
I think so.
But it is quite a thorny little thing, isn't it?
It is. It's there's a lot of depth and a lot of intensity. I think that's the word that keeps coming into my mind is intensity. Really, from the very first bar to the end of the piece, it never really lets up and never relaxes. Sort of, it has this kind of there's a nervousness and a kind of drive to it that is relentless.
There's a fervency about it it really it comes through, and I know that at the time, Mr. Curtis will speak about this after intermission, before the performance, but at the time he was writing the piece, he and Philip Smith discussed what Mr. Smith would like in a piece, and the subject of the religious aspects came up, and so clearly I think every note of the piece it's nothing but sincere and really heartfelt, and the sound of the shofar and all the different biblical references of use of music and trumpet in particular in the Bible is incorporated.
I think absolutely true. I think that comes through not only in the sort of the direct quotation of the shofar-like calls and melodies, but it also to me the thing about religion and the thing about spirituality is it's universal, but it's also unique to every individual.
Right.
And I think from that perspective, this piece is interesting because even though certain aspects of it, certain sounds in this world might not strike everyone as spiritual, in the end, the large scale context of the piece, I think, is deeply so.
Yes, absolutely.
And universal in that way, and that even though similarly to trying to read the Bible, or trying to understand these mysteries, many things in the Bible to many people may not make any sense.
Right.
But in the context of the whole work, there is an element of connection to something bigger than yourself there, and I think this piece is the same. There are so many moments when I find myself even playing the solo, I'm wondering, where is this going? Where are we going? Right. And then in the end, you're taken somewhere. You really are taken somewhere.
Yeah, there is no question about that, and I think also the fact that in the context of this piece, as the listeners will hear, those who have not heard the piece before, you begin on trumpet, and then you play flugelhorn, and then you end up on piccolo trumpet. So there's even a migration just in the way the piece is written for you.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about being a trumpet player is you get to play a lot of different horns.
Right.
It's good for collectors, and it's good for people with short attention span. That's what I think about trumpet. Is you can own 20 or 30 or 40 horns and be considered pretty normal, actually. You can own 100 or 200 and still be like, well, I can see that. I can see how that could happen. So yeah, the nice thing about the other nice thing about being a trumpet player is you get a lot of different voices, and you have the capability to make a lot of different kinds of sound. And the flugel is, of course, a beautiful sound, popular in jazz, of course, but a beautiful classical solo voice as well. And I think in this piece, the flugel sings really beautifully. He uses it in its low register and its upper register too, and I think it's a beautiful kind of sound, and it melds nicely with the horns, and nicely with
Right.
the middle winds as well. So in terms of just the scoring of the piece, I think it's a beautiful choice in that third movement. And then the pick trumpet at the end just kind of gives it this searing kind of
Right.
soaring quality, but also really kind of a real intensity to
Right.
finish.
You know, and then as the audience will see, you're joined by two of the players from the ensemble, two of the trumpeters who come
Yes,
up.
great kids,
Yeah,
great players.
So it ends up being a trio, you know,
It is.
with you at the end.
And they've got some notes to play.
Yes, they
Those
do.
guys, they do, and they're doing a great job. They're doing a beautiful job.
It really is. It's a wonderful piece, and no one escapes this piece unscathed in terms of the demands that are placed on them. You know, so
No.
it's really quite a demanding work, but really rewarding music. I think.
Yeah, it is really rewarding, and I hope the audience can. It's the kind of piece that benefits, I think, from repeated hearings for sure. But I think even on an initial hearing, you get a real impact from it.
I totally agree. I do think it's a live audience performance piece.
Yeah.
You know that I think the live aspect is something that in a way that I wouldn't say I would never want to record this piece, but I don't know that would be the ideal way to
Experience it.
Yeah, to really experience it.
I think it's true. I think it's true of so much music actually that it's
Right.
recording is great, and recording gives you a kind of a remembrance of the live experience. But without the live experience, recordings to me they're kind of they don't have
Right.
they lose some of the weight.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking this on, because we had talked about working together,
Yeah.
and then so you learned this piece for this, and so I can't thank you enough for taking time off
No, it's my
from
pleasure.
your day job to be here with us.
It's
So,
my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the performance.
great to have you here, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.